Alright, now before we can flip it over and start sewing, thank you, Lisa. One of the things I need to show you, there's several things here I need to show you. I prefer to use this by sewing machine because it's a lot quicker, but there are some of you students that live in a country where getting your hands on a sewing machine is about as difficult as getting your hands on a cell phone. So, we're going to do this by hand. Right here we have this flipped over right there, and this here is flopping free so that I can lay on top of it. Okay, see that there? This way here, it blends it in together. Now, I'm doing this here by hand. Since my eyesight is bad, I use this here to help me thread the needle. What you do is you take this, put it in through the needle like that, then you stick your thread through the little hoop right there, and it pulls the thread through for you, and then you can just even it out. Alright, I like to make the ends equal length on my thread. Now, what I'm going to do, now you notice I'm using white thread. The reason why I'm using white thread on this side is it doesn't matter because this is going to be getting flipped over like that and then tucked in. Okay, so let's begin. What you want to do is you want to make real fine stitch work. I like to keep my finger in here to keep it from bunching up, just like you're seeing right there. Alright, real fine. So I went through, now I'm going to go to the halfway point right here, and I'm going to go through again. Now I'm going to repeat this process all the way down and around. And you see how it starts to bunch up there? Unless I keep it steady with my finger. See that fine little stitch work? Let's bring that closer. You see that? You want little fine stitch work just like that. So, just go ahead and lay that back down. Alright, you're going to watch me sew for a little bit. And as we do this, let's see if we can find something to talk about here. Talk about how long this can take sewing it by hand. Well, that is all determined upon how fast of a sewer you are. See, I've had students spend 5 days working on this, sewing it by hand, and I've had some students spend as little as 3 days working on it by hand. Of course, so those were in classes where the classes were 4 hours long to 6 hours long. So it's all up to the individual on how long it takes to do this. Now, as you see, I'm keeping my stitch work nice and straight. Very fine stitch work. I can go even finer. I'll show you one. See, this here is good. That's going to hold it together. But I'm going to show you one that's even finer. See, I'm going to go real close to it. Now, there's one time I made a medieval dress for my first wife, and we went to a costume contest, and the rules of the costume contest was that the costume had to be homemade in order to enter into the contest. I'm not trying to brag here or anything like that, but we lost because the judges thought the costume was store-made. And in actuality, it was completely handmade. In fact, it was sewn by hand and everything. To make the costume, it took me 6 weeks to make it. And factor in time that I had to work as well, but you know, 6 hours a day, 6 weeks working on it. It was very elegant, very nice, and we showed up with her wearing it, and everyone complimented her on where she bought it at, and she told them that I made it. And maybe we should have showed the judge that it was homemade stitch work, so before they started doing their thing, you know, making an opinion on who should win the contest. But I didn't think my work was that good that people would think it was store-bought. So we lost the contest. I wasn't happy about it, but you know, looking back on it, I can try and say, you know, I did a pretty good job. And from that, I ended up with a unfortunate part-time job at home where people from the SCA, which is a medieval reenactment group, they would come to me with their outfits, their what they call garb, the medieval garb, that they had purchased through museum replicas to repair the stitch work, because the threading that the museum replicas used was not very good. Stitch work, pattern, everything was great, gorgeous pieces, but the thread, it was just, the thread was not good. It was weak thread that they used on their products, and they probably used weak thread to save money, even though they charge out the rear end for their outfits. And, you know, I can't blame them for charging out the rear end for their garb, and considering that it is exact replicas of outfits that were worn back during that time period. So if they had probably used better thread, they would probably have to charge a little bit more, and the patterns they were using were very detailed patterns. Okay, we're coming up towards our little flap here. What's going to happen is that's going to stitch these two down together. Now, if we were using a sewing machine, we wouldn't have the bobby pins that way. We would need to have it this way. Okay, not going this way, but this way if we were using a sewing machine, so the needle can go right over it. But that's not what we're doing here. We are sewing by hand to demonstrate to you guys that are in countries that can't afford to just run out and buy a sewing machine. A sewing machine in America costs, Lisa, what would a sewing machine here in America cost? You can get them for $40. Is that a good sewing machine though?
It's a decent.
Okay, well I guess you can get a decent sewing machine here in America for $40. But to come across $40 in some countries is like, you know, trying to find a leprechaun. It's just not going to be so easy. And some countries just don't have the luxuries that other countries do. So that is why I am showing you how to do this by hand. Now, notice that I'm doing this very delicately, making sure that I get it just right. You see there? Barely any of the white is showing here, and that's good, okay? That's good. So we're coming towards our little fold over lip there. We're right at the lip, and I'm going to sew right over it. Now let's go ahead and take that needle out so we don't lose it. We want to hold that in place, make sure it doesn't fall in a direction that we don't want it to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold that down, and I'm going to pin this right across it. Pin it just the same way as I would as if I'm going to be sewing it with a sewing machine. And there we go. I'm sewing right over our flaps, or lips, whatever you want to call it. And you see how it's starting to bunch up. keep a straight line when doing this too. If you need to, you can use a pen or marker and make a line of where you want to sew, so to make sure that you keep a straight line while sewing it down. Now you don't want to pull on it to make it tight, you just want to gently tug it into place. If you pull on it too hard, you're going to bunch up the material, you're going to snap your thread, or maybe both. Now the thicker the material, the harder it is going to be to sew by hand. You just have to be more patient. This is cotton and satin that I'm using. You can use any material that you want to use, but this is the ones that Lisa picked out for hers. So here we go. We're just about through that part. Alright, so the next step, I'm going to show you with how to deal with sewing down around the corners over here, which is another process in itself. So see you in a few.